Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks, and it is pay-per-view preview week. But this week, gonna have a little bit of spice at the end of the episode because this week's pay-per-view is not a pay-per-view that should take up an extreme amount of time. However, we also have some fight announcements and some big names. And depending on your opinions on some of these fighters, the UFC either went to the Hall of Fame and grabbed some guys, or they went to the retirement home and grabbed some guys. That is left up to personal interpretation. But that being said, some big names that we should also talk about because that news dropped within the last hour, 2 hours. So that is the plan for today, and we'll be starting right off the top with UFC 302, and we will be starting at the main event. Dustin Poirier versus Islam Makhachev. Dustin Poirier's third chance at UFC gold, and Islam Makhachev, if he wins this fight, I believe he will have as many title defenses of the lightweight belt as Khabib. So big stakes for both of these guys. In terms of personal goals, we have a pretty wide line on the betting odds. We've got Islam Makhachev minus 650, Dustin Poirier plus 470. What do you guys make of this main event? How do you see it going? What are your thoughts as we sit? It is Wednesday prior to the fight. Jerry, we can swing it over to you first.
I think the odds kind of tell the story. This could be very one-sided. Obviously, at least I'm hoping Dustin Poirier can do something. It'd be cool to see him get the actual belt. He had the interim belt, I believe, before he fought Khabib. This one, I just don't see anything happening. Good for him. There's all the jokes about him going for a guillotine. We saw that a lot in the Benoit Saint Denis fight. If that happens, I think Islam will just slip out, take his back, and it'll be done in 60 seconds kind of thing. Islam is just so well-rounded in every aspect of this. I don't see Poirier putting up much of a challenge anywhere. Sure, he still has some power, and he still can knock you out on the feet. We saw that with Saint Denis. Yet at the same time, Saint Denis had that staph infection or something was going on there medically, it seemed. But so I guess it's just also nice to see Islam defending his belt against a lightweight, even if it is one that we don't necessarily think should be fighting for the belt. I'm still on board with it. Should have been Sarukian and Oliveira and Gaethje both kind of messed up their opportunities for it as well at UFC 300. So kind of just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. Sarukian, though, at least he didn't, want to do the quick turnaround and stuff. I think he deserves a full, normal camp or whatever. So I'm never be mad at a Dustin title fight. I think he's done enough, just in general. But yeah, it's going to be tough. Obviously, his path is going to be on the feet. Maybe getting close, making it a little bit more of a dirty fight where they're actually throwing. But I don't know if Islam's gonna, just get rid of the game plan. He's probably obviously gonna go for the takedown, and that's where he has the biggest advantage over Dustin. So I agree. It's a long shot, but I'm leaning with Islam, but we'll see. I think Dustin could maybe surprise some people. Shoot, he probably surprised some people during the BSD fight, but we'll see.
Yeah, and so I just want to start it off with the over 35 stat. Like, that is kind of gone under the radar in this week just because no one thinks Dustin's going to win anyways, so no one really cares to bring up the stat. But it seems like every pay-per-view there's a fighter that's over 35 in a title fight, and then the same stat rolls around, and now they're 2-22 in title fights at 170 or lower. So it's and only in one of those wins came against another guy who was over 35. So when you're over 35, you simply don't win title fights at a great rate. And that being said, that kind of passes the eye test as well with Dustin. I don't think he looked as good against BSD, specifically in the grappling. He was getting taken down at will. And yeah, he's attempting guillotines. And he had some good attempts in there, in all fairness. I poke a lot of fun at Dustin for attempting as many guillotines as he does. But that being said, he did have a handful of good attempts in there and stopped progress on takedowns. But I think Islam is not the guy that you're going to catch in a guillotine. That being said, it could be an interesting fight on the feet. Both southpaws, and we saw in Islam's last fight, landed a head kick knockout, and his kicks are a real weapon. Both out of the southpaw stance, kind of ruined some of Islam's offensive weapons on the feet. So in Dustin, his style can translate against southpaw orthodox. So it could be a closer fight than people expect on the feet, even though Islam is talented on the feet. But I mean, I don't think we're going to get a 5-round fight where Islam is not attempting takedowns at all. I think he's going to proactively grapple, land the takedowns at some point, get the submission, avoid the guillotine. So I really don't give Dustin much of a chance outside of Islam making massive game plan mistakes or Dustin landing a check hook, a counter hook, or him, jumping a guillotine. And I'm not saying those are massive probability outcomes either. So I've got Islam pretty cleanly this weekend, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this could go maybe 3 rounds max. I think if Islam is staying on the feet early on in the fight and he's just kind of throwing with Dustin, after a while, I'll be like, all right, screw this. Let's just get this over with and take him down, take his back, finish him easy.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to bring up quickly is I don't like how much Dustin talks about retirement. That's concerning going into a title fight. But maybe that turns into Dustin knowing it's his last fight. He pours out the jug, every bit of fight he's got left. Maybe that's the case. But I do want to get your guys' thoughts on if you think he's actually going to retire if he wins or loses. But I think we're all pretty in agreement that he loses. If he loses, do you think Dustin retires this weekend?
I'm trying to think, because when it comes to retirement, you try to think of his next fight, what that would be. And if you lose this fight, there's no real chance at another belt, right? You don't have another run in you. So then you're looking at money fights. He said he wasn't doing the McGregor one anymore, or he's done with that chapter. Chandler, he's already fought Chandler. I mean, those are the exciting, winnable fights. Like, I guess I don't really know who else he would fight, unless he wanted to fight Gaethje again. But yeah, I would say I could see this being his retirement, or maybe one more, just to get another win in front of, say, like, I don't know if they're fighting Louisiana or something, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think the only possibility I think of if he was to stay around is if he does win the belt. I think if he retires, it's one of those things like, all right, your time's up. You're never going to really get another shot at it. And if you do, you're 0 for 3 so far. It's time to hang up and I mean, obviously there are guys who still fight with nothing else, nothing really to go for. But it's one of those things like, if you're not fighting at this level to fight for a belt when you've been at the top the whole time, why are you fighting? Are you just looking for money? And I don't think Poirier has any issue with that. He's family and all that. So I think if he loses, he's retiring. If he wins, massive if. That's where I could see a 4th McGregor fight happen. That's the only fight I think that he would end up doing. I don't think he would fight Sarukian right away. Maybe he would later this year, but that just to me kind of seems like the fight that would happen. I know, as you said, Anthony, he did come out and say he doesn't want a 4th fight. But if he has a belt, the UFC might push for that Conor and Poirier 4 after what happened in the 3rd fight with the leg break. Otherwise, I think he could very well just ride off into the sunset as the champion. But it just seems like if he wins the belt, he'll want to defend it at least once. And I'm just not sure who that would be against.
Well, also, I was just saying real quick, everyone also says, they want to retire until that they're looking at that check of that McGregor fight, and then yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if he loses, I'm on the same page that there's not really much left for him. The only fight that I could maybe see is Colby Covington, just because they have that history. Maybe they booked that as like a 5-round co-main pay-per-view. Both guys kind of on the older side, but then again, that's not something that's like massive at this point. I think that was bigger a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's much left. Then again, if he wins, I think your big option is the McGregor 4th fight. If McGregor wins, I also don't think he'd fight Sarukian, but I also think a Max Holloway lightweight title fight suddenly makes a lot more sense if Dustin wins. Dustin versus Max for the belt trilogy there, I think makes a lot of sense and would be a very big pay-per-view, considering Max's last performance, considering Dustin's last performance, and that's assuming he beats Islam. Obviously, that's a lot of hypothetical, him beating Islam, but I think that is a fight that would make sense. And then you can run Ilya out there against Brian Ortega, then send Max back down to 145 after that. And, I think Max if he beats Dustin, then you have the lightweight belt, and now you can do a stadium in Madrid, and Max is going for 2 belts, and all of a sudden you could create some really, really massive fights if Max gets that 155-pound belt. So that's obviously all hypothetical. Like I said earlier, I think he loses and probably retires is the short of my answer. But while we were entertaining hypotheticals, I think there's a lot of things that could keep him there for his next title defense if he wins.
One other one, just kind of more on the fun side of things. Would never happen, but do it like you said, Anthony. Do a fight in Louisiana. Give him a hometown fight to walk out on, and give him another Louisiana guy in DC. Why not?
That's funny. That actually, I do think that would be appealing enough to keep Justin around. You get to headline against Fazeev maybe, or someone like that.
Someone there.
All right, the co-main event's fairly appealing as well on this card. This is a 5-round fight. Big note there because I think that is kind of swept under the radar a little bit, but this is 5 rounds. Paulo Costa and Sean Strickland. This is massive fight for 185. Both these guys coming off losses, but Strickland's loss was a title fight. Paulo's been losing a little bit more frequently, but you beat a guy who held the belt in the last calendar month or calendar year. All of a sudden, you're in a pretty good spot in this division, even if he hasn't been on the best run. So, big fight here. What do you guys make of Paulo Costa and Sean Strickland? And betting odds, almost forgot. Nothing crazy, but it is fairly wide. Paulo Costa plus 200, Sean Strickland minus 240. All right, Anthony, it's your turn to lead us off. What do you make of the co-main event?
I really like this co-main. And that could be because I'm actually like a decent Paulo Costa fan. I don't know. I find him, well, in this division at least, there's not much in there, but I like some Costa fight weeks, especially what I've been seeing recently, because it seems like he's getting back on track and actually trying again. But I think, yeah, and Strickland in his last fights has, shown enough to, at least be, I guess, a little entertaining and stuff. But overall, I don't know. I'm surprised by how wide the betting line is, like plus 200 for Costa. I think it's a lot, especially how he just looked after the Whitaker fight. But I know, Sean Strickland, he looked good in his last one, and it's 5 rounds, so his cardio is going to be there. So that is what I'm worried about, is maybe Costa gassing a little bit later in the 5th. But if anything, though, I think Costa has the power. Sean Strickland has no power. 5 rounds, as long as Costa's not dead tired, I think that knockout always will be there for him and not necessarily Sean, which helps. But yeah, I think this also could be looking like a fun fight too, as well. So like a little sneaky come-in for the middleweight division.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is going to be a very fun fight. I think it's going to be more entertaining than the title fight in the main event, but it's also just like you said, leading it off, James. This is a very important fight in this division. So obviously, Sean Strickland still the number 1 contender. What's Paulo Costa? He's 6th. He's 7th at the moment. So immediately beating the number 1 guy could throw your name right back into that mix for a title shot. And the way he fights, he can never count Paulo Costa out. It's just like the mentality side of things. Is he really gonna? If the fight goes on and he's not really piecing up Strickland, he's getting beat a bit. So in the exchanges, is he really going to try and get a knockout finish? Is he kind of just going to sit back and just take it and hope he gets to a decision? Because we know Sean Strickland can do 5 rounds. We've seen him do it. I just also don't know the mentality of Sean Strickland. He's such a wildfire at times that you don't know, is he going to be super motivated? He already did what he went out to do. He went out, won the belt, tried to defend it, lost that. He seems like the kind of guy who I guess doesn't necessarily need to have the belt back in this sport. It's kind of, obviously you probably want to, but it's one of those things like, I think he just likes fighting. And it's one of those that it's maybe his motivation isn't the same. And it's going to be interesting because one side it's a cardio guy who just lands shot after shot, and the other it's a power guy that can knock you out at any point. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the press conference because I think whereas Islam and Dustin will be very much, oh, he's good, I'm good at this, not much trash on him. I think there will be a lot of trash talk here, and also including the guy who's in the next fight we'll talk about.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting fight just from on the surface. It's power versus cardio. I think that's always something interesting. And an element of that is that Strickland will go to close 5-round decisions that don't really see him push the pace. It's very interesting. I don't think he always uses that cardio advantage as much as you would like to see. But I also think it's two guys that are more interested in moving forward and being in the other guy's face. And I'm interested to see how that plays out. And in my opinion, I think that favors Paulo. If you're telling me these two guys are getting in each other's face, I'll take the guy that hits harder and the guy with more weapons, because Strickland, really, we're just throwing jab, we're throwing straight, we're going to do the modified Philly shell, we're going to swat at punches, I'm going to throw a teep every once in a while. But we saw Costa land a spinning wheel kick in his last fight, and I'm not suggesting that he's going to land that in this fight. And well, to be fair, Sean Strickland has been knocked out with a spinning wheel kick, but that's a whole nother point of discussion. My overall point is that Costa has a lot more tools, right? He can throw straights. He can throw boxing combinations. He rips to the body. He throws hooks. He throws kicks to the head. He throws kicks to the body. And all those are big, heavy shots. And I just think that if you're going to stand and trade, it's going to be Paulo landing a lot of big shots. That said, if Paulo doesn't really do serious damage, he could gas out after 2 rounds, and it could turn into Strickland winning 3, 4, 5 with his jab and his straight. So I think that's a real possibility. The last thing I will add is that I think Paulo's resume doesn't look great, but when we look at it, it's a loss to Izzy and a loss to Whitaker. And the one thing that those two guys have in common is elite footwork guys, elite movers. They're not going to stand in front of you with minimal movement. They're very technical in how they move in the octagon. And they can get in and out of the pocket much more efficient and much cleaner than a guy like Strickland. So I do think, even though Paulo hasn't been winning fights, I think he's been losing fights to guys who are more technical and have much better footwork. So I think that has kind of made his recent run look not as good. And then there's the Vettori loss, and we all know he just showed up fat and out of shape. And yeah, he lost that fight. If he shows up fat and out of shape, he loses this fight. So, I mean, that doesn't really tell me much skill-wise. So I'm picking Paulo here as a big underdog, and I don't know that comes to a surprise as many people that consistently listen, because I rarely say positive things about Sean, even though I picked him to win his last fight. He lost that fight. So I'm back on the pick against Sean train here for what I think is legit reasons. I don't think I'm being biased against Sean. I think there's actual valid reasons to side with Paulo.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I'm also probably going to pick Paulo. I'm definitely there right now. And yeah, I'm interested to see it. I know Costa's not the biggest wrestler, but he did. He took down Rockhold twice. He was 2 for 2, but Strickland just, I think he was taken down like 6 times or something in the DDP fight. So that's just another avenue to, maybe make him think it's 5 rounds. That's what I'm saying. You got to maybe pull out all the stops. But in general, yeah, no, I definitely agree with hopefully Costa is one of the few UFC fighters that actually has great body work. And I hope he goes to it in this fight. especially maybe make Strickland just think about that a little bit. Another thing to think about, and then one of those hooks which he was hit by from Pereira, but Costa has hit Romero with devastating hooks. Well, he's hit Marvin Vettori with a couple, but you can't even you can't hit that dude with a bat and he wouldn't feel it. But so I also think maybe a little sneaky left hook action on Sean Strickland could for the knockout.
Yeah, you brought up the Alex Pereira fight with Sean Strickland. That's something I was thinking could be very similar to this, with two guys just going forward at each other. All it takes is one punch, and Paulo Costa carries that power. It's whether or not Sean's just kind of standing there moving towards him, because as we saw in the Pereira fight, he was walking towards Pereira, got hit once, fell backwards, tried to get up, and Pereira just closed the gap. It's the kind of thing that I could see Paulo Costa doing. Right this second, I think I'm leaning towards Costa. I just think he's fought tougher guys, and he's kind of been the better fighter overall in the last few years, despite what his record says. He looked very good in that Robert Whittaker fight, which that surprised me because that wasn't the Paulo Costa I was expecting to see, especially coming out of that Luke Rockhold fight, which was felt like a year and a bit ago before that Whittaker fight. So I'm leaning Costa right now. It could be changed by the time we get our UFC preview and predictions out, but it's one of those things where I'm going to take the guy who can put your lights out, but you just have to get your hands on him, and that's the hard part in this.
Yeah, and two things I want to add from Anthony, what you said, that's kind of came to my mind. The first, looking back at that, I said like he was out of shape and lost in that Vettori fight, and that's true. But like you said, he landed big shots in that fight. So when I say he was out of shape and lost, I don't want people to misconstrue that as me saying, he got ran out of the building. Like, he lost fair and square, but he landed big shots that probably knock out other guys. Vettori is just one of the most durable guys that we've seen. And the second thing, Sean Strickland hasn't fought a large resume at grapplers, right? So it's not like we've seen him grapple at a high level consistently in recent fights.
And that was the other thing too. Was I was kind of angry. It's like because he lost. I would say it was fairly close, like you said. I mean, he definitely lost, but it's like, you obviously didn't try, and that was like a close loss. Like, imagine if you tried anything.
He also had a point deducted in that fight, so I don't know if I don't remember the scorecards off the top of my head, but maybe that changed what the outcome could have been.
Yeah, I think he would have lost either way, but that just made the scorecards more favoritory. But like, he comes into that fight in better shape, and he doesn't get a point deducted. Like, he probably could have won that fight, but that's Paulo Costa for you.
Yeah, that's secret juice.
And that's also like the question of, because that was a 5-round fight. That's the only 5-round fight I think he's been in that's actually gone that far. He fought Izzy for the belt, and that was going to be 5 rounds, but that was over in 2 and a bit. So maybe it's the sloppiness of that and just the lack of preparation for a 5-round fight. I think he's probably learned from that experience, now knows what it's like to go 5 full rounds against an elite competition. Might be something he can take away from that and bring into this Sean Strickland fight, because I didn't realize this was 5 rounds until you mentioned it earlier, James.
Yeah, it's a good experience to have in your back pocket, to say the least. Like, I'd rather have a guy that had went 5 rounds and looked kind of iffy in the later rounds than a guy who looks kind of iffy in the 2nd round and 3rd round, and you've never seen him go in the 4th and 5th. At least you know what you're getting if you get to the later rounds with Paul.
Yeah, I was saying, I forgot. Where is this event at again?
It is, I think it's New Jersey.
Yeah, New
Okay,
Jersey.
okay.
So
no crazy elevation or anything. Just making sure.
And he felt Luke Rockhold that elevation too. People
Yes,
didn't love the Luke Rockhold performance, and that was that elevation. And that was the same night we saw other guys with off performances, and that wasn't just him. So a lot going on in the underlying of some of these Paulo Costa fights.
And that was a very weird fight, the Luke Rockhold one, because obviously Rockhold was kind of just appeared out of nowhere to fight. Most recently, he's now in karate combat, so there's that aspect of where he was going in his career, and you got to win. I was lucky. I got to meet Paulo Costa after that. I ran into him at a pizza restaurant. Him and his Brazilians were just putting down pie after pie. And, man, he looked like he took a little bit of damage from Rockhold, so I'm curious if Strickland can get his hands on him more.
That's funny that you ran into him eating pizza. That seems like a very strong or a very Paulo Costa thing to do right after a fight.
Nicest guy though. He was taking pictures with everybody and all that stuff.
What a guy. Moving on to the next fight on this card, and there's some similarities between Kevin Holland and Paulo Costa. Like sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get from Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland, much less of not showing up in shape. Kevin Holland I believe he showed up to the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight with a broken hand. That's far less than ideal, but he still won that fight. Refused to grapple Wonder Boy. Ended up breaking his hand, losing that fight. So Kevin Holland's another guy that just sometimes you just don't know what you get from Kevin, even though he's very good. And hey, they needed another fight for this main card. They called Kevin, and he accepted the fight at 185 pounds, up a weight class from his 170, and he's fighting Michal Oleksiejczuk. And one quick note that I found interesting is that Nick Diaz actually accepted a fight to fight Kevin Holland at UFC 303, and that got scrapped so they could make this fight. So just an interesting note that came out while we were recording. So, but with that being said, this fight is, I believe, pretty wide as well. Yeah. Kevin Holland minus 285, Michal Oleksiejczuk plus 225. What do you guys make of this matchup? Jerry, it is your turn to lead us off.
I think Kevin Holland's going to be motivated. I'll put that out there. Moving up a division, and we saw how, I don't know, I wouldn't say bad is the word to describe his performance at 299 against Michael Venom Page, but he just looked so confused. I think this will be a much more straightforward guy he's fighting. He's not going to see the crazy angles, the crazy form, and the wild shots. Question is, though, he's moving back up a division. How will he do with that? Assuming he'll be even better with the weight cut. So there's questions about that. But I think Kevin Holland fight's a fun fight. Like you said, you never know what's going to happen. I also think the one I remember really first watching, more recently, the one that stuck out was that Hamzat fight. He'll fight anybody, anywhere, and that was just 2 minutes of them rolling around in circles on the ground, just chaos. So I could see Kevin Holland bringing a chaotic style to this fight and just trying to do something crazy, get the crowd going, and hey, you never know. Because I mean, is it Oleksiejczuk? Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it. Oleksiejczuk.
Oleksiejczuk,
yeah. He's lost his last fight to Michal Pereira, which was also on that UFC 299 card. So they have the same amount of time to get prepared for this. I'm curious to see what happens because I don't remember watching a lot of Oleksiejczuk's fights in the past, and I obviously watched that and probably watched a couple others, but he doesn't seem to have fought as tough of guys as Kevin Holland has, and I think that might be a very beneficial thing for Kevin Holland.
Yeah, I was just going through. I thought it was weird that he just fought Pereira and lost his fighting again, but I guess if Holland was on that same card then. But yeah, he had a couple of names on there that I liked. He didn't necessarily beat them, but I think this should probably be a layup for Holland to just go out there and get a finish, style on him a little bit, throw some punches, maybe talk a little bit, get the fans back on his side after that MVP one. Because yeah, kind of like you said, Jerry, overall it's just an odd fight. He never really got it going or could figure it out. So I think this is, I think it's fair to say there wasn't too much damage took in that fight. I think Kevin Holland took really. So a quick turnaround, maybe get a finish here, at least get a good performance, and then get some fans back on your side. Also, like you said, they needed another fight, or the UFC thought they needed another fight for this card. So you can always call Kevin and get a couple more eyes on it, or at least make it all right. No one's ever going to completely scoff at a Kevin Holland fight. So
there's just one more thing real quick. It's like he also got submitted against Pereira. His last 3 losses were all submissions for Oleksiejczuk. we've seen Wonderboy. I mean, James, you brought it up on it. I think the Wonderboy fight where he refused to go to the ground. I'm not thinking that might. I don't think that'll be the case this time.
Yeah, I guess I should say too, when I was saying finish, or I was saying knockout, but yeah, if he's been submitted too, Kevin Holland does have some jiu-jitsu. So yeah, I agree. It won't be like the Wonder Boy. We could also see a finish on the ground as well.
Yeah, and when you look at why Kevin Holland dropped from 185 to 170, the reason is because he was getting out-grappled. Who was he getting out-grappled by? Derek Brunson, Marvin Vettori, like legit wrestlers. Like those aren't world-class guys, but like if you have a hole in your takedown defense, they will expose it. The same thing happened to Darren Till against Brunson, right? So, and Kevin Holland said, well, I can go down a division. I'll be even longer, and I'll be able to do better against there. Well, actually, in fairness, there won't be massive wrestlers like Brunson or Vettori at 170. They just can't make that weight class. You're just completely eliminating an archetype that you struggled against. He runs into Hamzat, who's an elite grappler. But I mean, he grappled with Hamzat for 2 minutes. And listen, he got submitted. But you throw a couple other people out there, and they're getting submitted faster. I'm just saying. Like, that fight was 100% grappling. Yeah. No preparation. He just showed up, grappled with Hamzat for 2 minutes. I'm just saying other people wouldn't have lasted 30 seconds. That's all I'm saying. He at least, I don't know how beneficial that is to other people, but that is worth noting. Other archetype he struggles with, highly, highly technical, kind of unorthodox, traditional guys. Wonderboy, MVP. So now we set him up to 185 to fight Michal Oleksiejczuk, who might be the worst grappler in the division. Maybe there are one or two worse, but he is legitimately one of the worst grapplers in the division. He's a pure boxer. So now we're getting Kevin Holland in a pure boxing match where he's going to have a length advantage over the guy, and he's got knockout power to knock him out. And if Kevin Holland wants, he could out-grapple this guy and probably submit him with the Darce choke in the first round. Kevin Holland, legit black belt in BJJ, even though his wrestling sucks. Legit Darce chokes, legit guillotines because he's so long. So knockout, submission. I think Kevin Holland finishes this fight relatively quickly. That said, Michal Oleksiejczuk does have good boxing. I do want to give him that credit, but I just don't think this is a good matchup for him to go show those boxing skills. He struggled with the length against Chidi and Jokawani. Didn't really do much until Chidi just gassed out and lost, which is something he does routinely. So I don't really take much away from that. So I think this is I'm jumping on the Kevin Holland side as well with you guys.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Oh man, I had something. Oh yeah, when did this fight get announced? Because it wasn't It was relatively recent, like last couple weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe it's been this month. It was announced. It is definitely a fresh fight. I believe it was announced during maybe the 301 pay-per-view. Or maybe a fight night. It was announced during a fight card in the last month.
It was during that 301 pay-per-view. So it's kind of a shorter notice fight then, I would say. And obviously they have the same time off since their last fights, but preparing for this, it's a lot harder when you're on the Oleksiejczuk side of you have to prepare for the grappling, the weird unorthodox striking of Kevin Holland. Whereas going the other way, if you're Kevin Holland, you pretty much just prepare to avoid the boxing. Just don't get hit because he can still put your lights out on Oleksiejczuk. I will say that. He's 14 knockout wins out of his 19 total wins. So he's a guy that looks to put people to sleep. And he's done that recently. But you also look at the guys he's fought. You mentioned Chidi and Chidi burned out. Cody Brundage, who in his defense, Cody Brundage, UFC 300 main card. But knocked him out in the first round. Knocked out Sam Alvey in the first round. All these fights are first-round knockouts in his last 4 wins. If Kevin Holland avoids that, I don't know. If say it does go to a second round, I don't know what Oleksiejczuk's going to look like. I don't think it would be pretty.
Yeah. Last thing I'll add, you brought up the preparation. Kevin Holland, the guy taking so many short notice fights, this is second nature to him. This not going to affect him at all, short notice. Moving down the card, Jelton Almeida, Alexander Romanov, 2 heavyweight grapplers that if it gets out of the first round, who knows? Like they may quit, they may gas out, who knows? Odds have it fairly wide for Jelton Almeida, minus 290. Romanov plus 235. I think that is reflective of Almeida finding a way to beat guys at a higher level, despite having similar skill sets. They're not identical by any means. One, Almeida's a little bit more BJJ focused. Romanov a little bit more wrestling focused. Still, Gelton Almeida has been able to go grapple bigger names, higher ranked guys. Romanov shows up fat, and he may miss weight. You never know with Romanov. That's just kind of what Romanov is. So I've got Almeida here just by him being more athletic, quicker in grappling. But hey, after we saw the Curtis Blades fight, I would not be surprised if he pulled a stunt and lost. But skills-wise, he's probably better than Romanov. Anthony, I believe it is your turn to send us off on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Almeida as well. Just for they both. Because I was gonna say I feel like he's more of a finisher, but I mean he's not. He couldn't finish Derek Lewis in 5 rounds. So, but yeah, I'm gonna take the wrestling mix, the BJJ leaning, wrestler that I think will have an easier time getting the finish than Romanov going necessarily more for the ground and pound style of wrestling. I do think I probably genuinely think Almeida is just better as well. And even though I took Blades, I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried after the first round a little bit in that last fight, because he just was getting manhandled a little too much. And so, Almeida, it looks like he can, dominate. Of course, yeah, he, got a bad takedown attempt, but I don't think Romanov is near where Blades is in department overall. So I see this more as being Almeida grappling fest, and I do believe he would find a submission in this one.
Yeah, if this gets out of the first round, I think it's going to be a decision fight. I think both guys are going to be gassed. I think it's going to be very, very ugly grappling and kind of 2 big guys just rolling around trying to lay on top of each other for the next 10 minutes. With that being said, the way Almeida looked in that first round against Curtis Blades looked like he could beat virtually anybody in that division, with the exception of kind of the guys at the top now. But then he just gassed. He was trying to get him out of there. I don't think he'll have the same issue of where Curtis Blades will just kind of take it and then still have the stamina and the aggression and still contain that power to get him done in the next round. Romanov, he doesn't put much confidence in me in this fight. He just seems slower. Like you said, he's a little more lethargic. It's just one of those things that if he does get out of the first round, sure, he went to a decision in his last fight and won, but that was against Blagoy Ivanov. So,
who's no longer in the UFC?
Not exactly the same kind of level that we've seen Gelton Almeida fighting. So I'm leaning Almeida. I'm going to say he gets it done pretty early. I think he'll submit him, but if it doesn't, this might be a good time for a bathroom break and go get some food and come back. So,
yeah, the last thing I'll add is I do like seeing Almeida find success against Curtis Blades, who's bigger than him and one of the better wrestlers in the division. Now he's going up against Romanov, who's also a good wrestler, also bigger than him. So it's not like this is something that he's never dealt with. And obviously he lost that fight, but it's because he got hit with elbows and decided he didn't want to get hit with elbows anymore. So I'm not sure that's a problem in this one.
Yeah, I also think this is a decent fight. Not saying that this needs to be his game plan or anything, but decent fight for Almeida to let the hands go a little bit in Romanov. Maybe show up, see where he's at in the striking department. Because this is a fight where he can let the hands go a little bit, and he's, doesn't got to be completely worried about getting knocked out necessarily. Like he can, of course, always still go to the wrestling and stuff, in the ground game. But I think Romanov's very hittable. Is not a terrifying striker. So,
yep,
something I would maybe want to see. Yeah.
Last fight on this main card, closest fight according to the betting odds, we have Randy Brown versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. That is currently lined -180 on the Randy Brown side, +150 on the dos Santos side. Personally, I like Randy Brown. I think he has made serious improvements as of late. So I'm siding with Randy Brown in this one. I like his length a lot, and I think he's learning how to use that length better. Similar to Kevin Holland in the fact that he can use his length to land submissions, not to the same extent as Holland, but I do think that's valuable. And I think he's finding ways to manage range better and land big shots. I respect Dos Santos's striking a lot. He beat Benoit Saint Denis to a pulp. He knocked out Sean Strickland with a spinning wheel kick. But I think at this point in his career, he's a little bit older. I believe he's 37 or 38. I have to double check that. But he is up there in age. And I just think the younger guy who's making an improvements is the guy that I'd want to side with. It's almost not even that much to do with skills, but I just think this is the one where the younger guy gets it done. So I like Brown here. And I do think it's going to be close, though. But I think Brown also has more finish upside, power in his hands, submissions as well. So I like Brown in this one.
Yeah, and to answer your question, Dos Santos is 37 at the moment. So
I'll say that, yeah. I like I'm trying to look up the fights for Dos Santos because I don't know if I've watched him fight recently. But
his recent ones is he went to 2 really close fights against Renat Fakhretdinov and Abubakar Nurmagomedov. Both were heavy grapplers. He did a really good job defending the takedowns, and then it was kind of him left to strike with guys that he was better at striking than. That's another thing that kind of pushed me towards Brown is we've seen him do it against, I don't know if better competition is the right word, but, I don't think that defend the grappling and outstrike a guy that you're already a better striker than is necessarily a very applicable approach when you're fighting Randy Brown, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I was gonna start off on I also like Randy Brown. I think I was a little late to him than most people, but I think he's a fun fighter and stuff. And the names he has, like Chaos Williams, took him to decision, which is impressive because Chaos usually will find one shot that can put your lights out. Beat Francisco Trinaldo in a decision, who I thought had really good striking. And then lost to Jack Della, which is fine. And then actually beat Muslim Salikov, who I saw actually Dos Santos had lost to, if you care about MMA math and all. But overall, I kind of I like what you said. I'm probably going to go with the younger guy. I'm not super familiar with Dos Santos, and I have what I've been seeing from Randy Brown recently. And I think there's potential there for him to, actually make some waves in the division. So I'll be going with him.
Yeah, I'm going to make this 3 for 3. I'm leading with Randy Brown also. My big thing is Dos Santos, like you said, 37 years old. He's only fought twice since he beat Benoit Saint Denis, and that was back in October of 2021. Meanwhile, Randy Brown, we've seen him grow as a fighter, and he's fighting pretty regularly. This will be his 4th fight in the last 2 years. He pretty much fights 2 times a year at this point. So he's more used to it. Not saying that there's any ring rust because it's not like Dos Santos is sitting out for a long time. His last fight was November of last year. But just give me the guy who's looked progressively getting better. He's progressively fighting tougher and tougher competition. Sure, like you said, Anthony, he lost that Jack Della Maddalena fight. That was in Perth. That was a home fight for Jack. They wanted to give him someone that could be an entertaining fight, but at the same time, someone that the hometown guy could go out and beat, in my opinion. But, I just think he's a little better at this point in his career. He's still only 33, so we talk about the MMA age things with champions and all that. It probably transitions as well if you look deep into it to other fights that are over 35s or under 35s.
Yeah, and I don't have anything else to add on this fight unless you guys do.
I do have one other point I wanted to make.
Okay, yeah, my bad.
I forgot about it until you mentioned Randy Brown fights and resides in New York. They're fighting in New Jersey. This is going to be a home fight for him. He is going to have a bunch of fans there. So, and with him opening up the main event or main card, I think it's good chance that he comes out and puts on a show for New Jersey and New York.
Yeah. I like the little Randy Brown to open up the card. I think that's a pretty good one when it comes to card openers, especially I feel like you said hometown.
Yeah. Good call there.
Home.
Yeah. Last thing on this is UFC preview will be out on Friday, UFC Best Bets as well. So if you want more in-depth thoughts, I'll have my actual written previews up and everyone will have their picks in, and that will include Garrett's as well. So that will be up on Friday. So just plugging that. But with 302 out of the way, or not out of the way, that's the wrong way to put it, in the rear view mirror, we had a lot of news that came out within the last 2-3 hours at this point. And very important news, I would say. The UFC Saudi Arabia card was announced. So I'll just read through that. We're not going to talk about every fight, but they did announce the card in whole. So the card features main event Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. That was booked already, but that is very solid main event for Saudi Arabia. Co-main event, which was a fresh announcement, Nick Diaz versus Vicente Luque, 5-round fight. Then we have Deiveson Figueiredo versus Cheeto Vera. That is a 3-round fight. That was announced earlier this week, so that didn't come out today, but it was not announced the last time we recorded. And then we have Mackenzie Dern versus Loopy Godinez. And the main card opener, Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. And it sounds like that will be Tony Ferguson's retirement fight. And that is the plan for Tony there to open the main card. So we don't have to touch on every single fight unless you guys have takes on every single fight, obviously. But when you see that collection of fight announcements, what's the one that stands out to you first? Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off.
It's tough. I mean, as a huge Cory Sandhagen guy, that one's going to stand out, especially because that's such a tough matchup. I think Cory Sandhagen, I don't know why Dana doesn't like him or Hunter. It seems like they give him every fight but a title fight or one to get there. But I know this fight's been teased for a while though and stuff. And Sandhagen said he doesn't care; he'll fight whoever.
Yeah, this fight was also meant to happen last year in Nashville before Umar pulled out and was replaced by Rob Font. So there's that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, so it's clear that Sandhagen doesn't care and he just likes to fight. He just likes to fight and he'll fight whoever. I think he said, "If I'm the best, it doesn't matter who I fight. I need to beat him anyways," or something like that, which is fair. So I think, if he, wins this fight, I mean, there's no denying him now. I think he needs to be, if not a title fight, I think he needs, at least to be in the title eliminator or whatever. But also, great, huge step for Umar too. This could catapult him right away.
Yeah, I've got a couple thoughts off the back of that. One, I think the winner has to fight for the title, especially if we see Sean O'Malley versus Merab. Winner of that, I feel like, is who else are you going to fight? Especially if Cory wins. If Umar wins, maybe you could talk him down because he's only got one. But I mean, I think if you beat Cory Sandhagen and you're fighting for the title, no complaints from me. And for Cory Sandhagen, his run has been very, very good. It's not like this is the only win he's going to have. He's won several fights in a row. So great run from him. I will say I'm not in love with Umar jumping from where he's at to Cory Sandhagen. I'm not saying we can't speed up the process, but I am saying maybe we give him someone like a Rob Font, like a Cheeto, like a Figgy before we give him a number one contender. I just think he's skipping a lot of steps. That said, if he wins, congratulations, you can fight for a title. They allowed him to skip the steps, and that's the benefit of it. But I will say I wish we would have saw even just one fight before we got this one. I would have appreciated that. But, yeah, great fight. Number one contender, in my opinion.
Well, real quick, I'm gonna say that's funny because actually in the same division, that's what Sean did. Was got to skip all the steps. Technically, there was that Pedro fight, I think, where that ended quick. But I remember the same thing was like, I wish he would get one more fight. He did beat Jan, though, however, and then obviously the rest is history.
Yeah, that is a good comparison because, Sean kind of did that. And we've seen it with other fighters. We've seen Sean Strickland kind of move up. We saw Steve Erceg fight for the belt from the 10th ranked place. Obviously, those are different divisions where there's not a whole lot of challengers for anything, but that brings us to the point of like, Cory Sandhagen's also beaten a lot of these guys at the top. Only guys he hasn't, I think, are Merab and Sean O'Malley because he hasn't fought those guys, unless I'm mistaken. But yeah, so why not? I'm not opposed to this. I think it just shows the balls that Cory Sandhagen has going to Umar's backyard, pretty much. Take him on there. It's going to be a hostile crowd, but I love Cory Sandhagen. His style is fun. He's just an entertaining striker, and it's going to be that typical striker versus grappler sort of fight.
Last thing I want to add on that fight is I will openly be rooting for Cory Sandhagen and Sean O'Malley, not because I want one to win and I love Sean O'Malley and I love Cory Sandhagen, which I do like Cory, but I'm pretty unbiased. But that's a fight I want to see. Like Sean O'Malley versus Cory Sandhagen is a sensational fight that I want to see. Like that matchup's brilliant. So I will admit that I'm openly rooting for those two guys just in the hopes that we can see that matchup. If they both lose, make that fight even.
True. I think that'd be an amazing main event title fight. But yeah, even if they lose, then it would just be a normal amazing main event for Coleman.
Yeah.
Yeah, do something else like this where it's we're getting back to UFC fight nights having good main events. Mm-hmm. That would be a great UFC fight night main event. Do it in some town somewhere, just not the Apex. So one of those.
Let's go right down to the co-main because I think this was the biggest shocker of the group. Nick Diaz versus Vicente Luque. And what are we getting from Nick Diaz? I don't know. Like, how do you know what you're going to get from Nick at this point in his career? I will say I'm happy we have Nick back. I'm never going to complain about Nick fighting unless we get to a point where I think he's, really jeopardizing his long-term health because he shouldn't be in the UFC. But I don't hate the idea of giving him a shot, and I understand why people would be mad about a fight against Luque, considering everything Luque has done. Like, Luque is a violent fighter, but Luque has not looked great since he has come back from his brain hemorrhage. Even in the RDA fight, he wins that fight, but he didn't really look like he wanted to strike in that matchup. In the Buckley fight, there was just something off kind of watching that. And then Buckley takes him down and Luque just shells up and doesn't move when there's ground and pound. It kind of felt like he quit, in my opinion. So I just think there's something off with Luque. So I don't think it's a terrible fight. That said, if we get Luque, say the flip switches and Luque is back to where he was 4 years ago, Nick may be in some trouble. But I will say I'm happy to see Nick back in the UFC, even if this is a really, really sketchy matchup.
Yeah, I just don't know why he's back. Because first of all, he took 7 years or 6 years off between his Anderson Silva fight in 2015 and fighting Robbie Lawler in 2021. Now he's taking another 3 years off. I don't know if he just wants to go and fight or what the deal is or why, but it just seems so random that he's back fighting again. He's 40 years old. I could see him going and maybe doing a boxing event of some sort like we see with Nate Diaz. I just don't know what kind of motivates him at this point in his career, and especially after all the issues he's had with the UFC in the past. It just seemed weird, and hey, maybe this is one of those fights that loser retires. I haven't seen Nick recently. You were saying Vicente Luque's looked very suspect as of late. Two guys getting up there in age, so loser goes home. I could say the same thing about the last fight on this card as well, but
yeah,
it just seems so random when I woke up and saw Nick Diaz is back.
Mm-hmm. One thing I will quickly add is that there was a report that Nick has 5 fights left on his contract. That does not mean that the UFC will not let him go box if he chooses to, but he does have plenty of fights left on his deal. They did let Aldo go box. When Aldo was boxing, he did have that fight that became the Martinez fight. That fight was still on his deal. So it's not impossible that he goes and boxes, but he does still have fights left on his contract. I'm not sure that really tells us much, considering they might still go out and box anyways, but it's worth noting.
I mean, also at the same time, is there really a way he gets 5 more fights in the UFC?
No.
If he fights at this pace he is recently, he'll be 55 by the time his last fight's up. So.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting fight. Was not expecting this either. Doesn't have to be the co-main, but it is. I don't know. I guess it's a Nick Diaz fight. People are the only real intrigue is, I guess, just gonna see how Nick's looking and stuff, and see what he can do. So It is what it is.
And to add on to that, it's only the kill main event is because Nick probably, I'm not gonna say Nick demanded 5 rounds, but if you are Nick Diaz's team negotiating your next fight, please, for the love of God, give me a 5-round fight. Like, if you're a Diaz brother, you want 4 and 5. So that's probably why it's the co-main event. It probably wouldn't have been the co-main event otherwise, but that is worth noting. And there was last thing I'll add on the Nick Diaz conversation. There was, according to Ariel Helwani, he had accepted many, many fights. It was revealed he was asking for these fights. So it sounds like Nick has been asking for the fights for a long time. He has to fight George St. Pierre. Obviously, George is retired. He has to fight Colby at UFC 300. Did not get that fight. Asked to fight MVP at 303. Did not get that fight. Asked to fight Kevin Holland at 303. Did not get that fight. So it sounds like Nick has plenty of guys that he's more than interested in fighting. And here's one thing I will say. When you're looking at that list, obviously you'd want to fight George St. Pierre. Obviously, you would want to fight at UFC 300. Now, why did you ask for 2 fights at UFC 303, which is the Conor pay-per-view? Nate's not in the UFC anymore. I'm just throwing that out there that maybe he was trying to get a win on the Conor card and try and go after that Conor fight with Nate out of the picture. Just throwing that out there. That may be the whole reason he's doing this thing.
And what weight class is the Conor fight at? And what weight class is the Diaz fight at?
They are both at 170 pounds.
Exactly.
So
that actually makes great sense. And this is not like he's calling out easy guys in MVP and Kevin Holland either.
Nope.
It's interesting.
So, just some thoughts on that whole. I think that adds some context as to what his actual goal is that he's doing here. And Nick will probably also be asking for the George St. Pierre fight while they're both in their retirement home. They could both be 80 years old, and he'll say, "Where's George?" He'll call Dana, "Where's George?"
We'll run it back.
Yeah. All right. Let's swing it over to the Tony fight because I think this is a very similar fight. Tony Ferguson booked to fight Michael Chiesa. And I will say, I have been very adamant in the fact that Tony should retire. I don't remember when the first time I said that was, but it's been at least 2 or 3 fights in a row. Maybe it was after the Chandler fight, but every fight since then I've said, hey, that was probably enough. Certainly the Nate fight didn't help. He didn't look great in that fight. Bobby Green fight didn't help. He didn't look great in that fight. The Patty fight didn't look like he liked to get hit. Couldn't get up off bottom, and I think we are far past the point of no return for Tony Ferguson as much as I love Tony. Like, he's a Michigan guy. I'm a Michigan guy. I'll forever love Tony, but it's just not looking good for him. And that said, Chiesa, I think, is an appropriate retirement fight. There were some other ones that I would have liked. Paul Felder, but at this point, Paul Felder's probably not coming back. I just thought that made a lot of sense. If he was coming back, throw him in there with Tony. Measuring stick, obviously. But Chiesa at 170 pounds, a guy that's going to look to grapple. But but they can go out there and grapple for 15 minutes, and Tony can retire without taking some more shots to the head. So I actually do really like this fight if Tony is forced another fight. I don't love the idea of Tony fighting, but if Tony's forced to fight, I think this actually makes a lot of sense as a retirement fight.
Why not just do the two 40-year-olds going at it, Nick Diaz and Tony Ferguson at this point?
It's a fair question.
That's what I saw people. I saw a couple people say that.
Because, it's Tony's done. He's past his prime at this point. We all know what Tony once was, and it's kind of sad just seeing what he is now. And it's just, I want to see him get a win here and just go off on that note. But at the end of the day, he probably won't win. It's Tony Ferguson. You never know, but I just don't like the idea of him keep going. And I guess you made a good point there, James. If he's fighting a grappler, guy who's not going to punch him in the head, kick him in the head again. So let him go in, see what the decision goes with, and go home happy.
Yeah, I think this is a really good matchup because, you're not going to – it's almost a guarantee he is not getting knocked out with the hands. I also think Chiesa just has not looked good in his last couple of fights. Like, even he was supposed to be a grappling guy. He's been getting out-grappled continually in his last couple of fights that I've seen. So, I mean, I think it's all the ingredients are there for, to walk off in the sunset, Tony to win. And so, of course, like a true Tony fan, I think he's going to win. And maybe. But that's the thing. Can he retire after he wins? Because who knows? He might go on another 6-fight win streak, but we'll see.
Here's one thing I will say about this matchup. We've already established that they're grappling. Michael Chiesa is 11-7 in the UFC. 5 of those losses have come by submission. Most recent loss, Kevin Holland, Darce choke. Vicente Luque, Darce choke. Jorge Masvidal in 2013, Darce choke. The other 2 are Kevin Lee rear naked choke and Anthony Pettis triangle armbar. Those are his 5 submission losses. 3 by way of Darce choke. Every time Michael Chiesa gets put in a Darce choke, something bad happens, and he ends up tapping. And I'm not going to pull up Tony Ferguson's record, but I will say he did not earn the nickname the Darce Knight by not landing Darce chokes. So if anyone is looking for some reasons for Tony Ferguson to win, there it is. I will leave it at that.
Exactly. You know the meme, it's like, you don't know how good Tim Duncan was. It's like, kids, back in the day, you don't know how good Tony Ferguson was. That Darce could come into play.
Yeah. And once again, to be honest, I did bet him by submission against Bobby Green. So I may just have to run it back if you give me a big enough number on Tony by submission. If you can give me exact outcome Tony Ferguson by Darce choke, I may have to
hammer it.
I'm not going to put a lot, but I may have to sprinkle a couple of extra dollars on that.
If those betting odds come out soon, I'm doubling up. Dustin Poirier by Gilly. Tony Ferguson by Darce choke. It's over.
Dustin Poirier by Gilly is plus 2,200, so there is a fairly big return on the Dustin Poirier by guillotine bet. If you're looking for that one.
Is that just straight up guillotine or?
Yeah. And the one nice thing about betting on guillotines that happen is sometimes other submissions happen, and then the person who's writing down what submission it was doesn't know it's a guillotine. And then you get the guillotine finished. It is kind of nice. But that's just something to think about as well. All right. Let's quickly touch on these last 2 fights because they are also ranked fights. So let's touch on those. Deiveson Figueiredo versus Chito Vera. Sold. Good fight. I don't know how much you guys have to add, but sign me up 10 out of 10 times. I love this fight.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I didn't know if that was just me. This fight's really interesting to me because I'm not the hugest Chito fan, and I don't know why the Figgy matchup makes me excited. Like for both these guys, the height difference, the there's the styles. I can see hopefully not a bit of Figgy not being super active, but yeah, overall, I love it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just to see Figgy try and climb the 135 rankings. Like that in itself is interesting. And now you have him fighting the guy who fought for the title. And Cheeto, like people love to shit on Cheeto when he loses, and I get it when he loses. He never loses in promising fashion. But like he could do something spectacular here. Like this is the type of fight where he lands the front kick, he lands something. I am also really intrigued by this matchup. I love this fight.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a blast because I mean we saw what Figueiredo did to Cody Garbrandt in his last fight. Feed me this one. It's going to just be fun because at the end of the day, Cheeto, if he wins, I don't think it'd be a decision. I think he's going to win by knockout if he does. And Figueiredo, if he wins, he's just one step closer to a title fight and all that stuff. So, I mean, why not? It's just a win-win all around. This one, and then I guess the Sandhagen one's exciting, but this one stands out to me as like two guys. You kind of know a bit of what you're going to get. It's just going to be fun and fast-paced.
Yep. Last fight on this main card, Mackenzie Dern, Luque Godinez. This fight, two girls that love to find a way to lose. They both got talent. They both got skills, but they will find a way to lose. So I don't know who's going to win. I don't know which one's going to find a way to lose. The one thing I will say, someone lock Mackenzie Dern in a wrestling room, teach her how to land takedowns so she can actually use her jiu-jitsu. But Luque Godinez, very, very skilled, but then here's the best way to put it. Luque Godinez is the type of girl that if Mackenzie Dern pulls guard, she will be like, oh, yeah, I'll go in your guard and try and grapple with you. Like, that's the type of girl Luque Godinez is. So it makes for a fun fight, honestly.
This gives me the vibes of, I don't know if you guys watch South Park at all, but episode where they're playing baseball and everyone's just trying to lose. This is what this fight gives me. It's no, obviously they want to win, but they just both find ways to constantly lose. And it'll be like, you'll go out, say Dern, for example, she'll go out, win a nice fight, look really good doing it. And then the next fight, you expect the same thing, and it's just atrocious. And everything you got from that one is now canceled out and gone. I don't know how this fight affects the division, really. It's, 7-10, I think. So, hey, another ranked win for someone. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. And the UFC would love to have Mackenzie Dern have a belt for obvious reasons. There's some, we'll just say marketability there. So every time Mackenzie Dern wins a fight, it's actually pretty important for like the title landscape, ironically enough.
I think, these are two fighters I actually like in this weight class. I think, so, I mean, it is. I think I'll be there for it. I'm never mad at Mackenzie Dern fight. And then I like Loopy striking a little bit, actually, compared to the rest of the division. So it'll be fun, hopefully. I feel like Dern, too, even in losses, she at least has entertaining fights in the sense. Sometimes she gets teed off on, but yeah, she's always in there, going for it at least, and Loopy striking as well. So it should be entertaining at least.
Yeah, Mackenzie will never be afraid to put herself in danger in the hopes of winning a fight.
Exactly.
And sometimes that'll result in her. I don't remember which fight it was, but it was relatively recent. She was getting beat up. I want to say it was Lemos.
Bad.
She got beat up bad by Andrade. But in the Lemos fight, it was like she's getting beat up, and now all of a sudden she's deep in a submission. It's like, oh my God, is she gonna pull it off? It's like Mackenzie Dern, for better or worse, will give you like spikes of like, oh, what's happening here? Or like, oh my God, like for her long-term health, probably not great. For short-term audience viewing pleasure, it is a good time.
Dare I say Brian Ortega-esque?
Yeah. Brian Ortega's a little bit better at winning those types of fights than Mackenzie Dern. I think it's a difference, but lots of similarities.
Yeah, this is just gonna be an intriguing fight.
Yep.
You don't know what's gonna happen here.
Yeah. Yeah, and it ended up being a fairly fairly packed episode here. We got UFC 302 in. We got all of UFC Saudi Arabia in. So we didn't fit in UFC 302 final thoughts. But to be honest, the prelims are a tad shit. So we'll do that next week when we're recapping the card. We'll throw some final thoughts up there and highlight some of those fighters on the prelims. But that will be next week's episode, UFC 302 recap, unless we get more breaking news, unless we get a full fight card of, say they announce a UFC Paris fight card in September and we get 5 fights or something like that. But next week docket is UFC 302 recap. And thank you to everyone for sticking through what ended up being a fairly long episode. But like I said, we did have a decent amount of breaking news. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to Vendetta Sports Media. Check out the website, vendettasportsmedia.com, and check out the UFC posts that are coming out this Friday. And I'm probably going to actually do some news as well today. So there will be some UFC content here today and throughout the rest of the week. So make sure to check that out. Peace.